Hey everyone, this is Samantha from Painted Palettes. I am a calligrapher and watercolor artist based out of DC, and I'm here to help you embellish your rosé glass. And first and foremost, if you have the supplies now, great. If not, this will be on my blog for you to reference later on if you wanted to do this after you watch. But some things you're going to need are your glasses. In the blog, I've linked plastic ones as well as glass ones. You have your printout, some various markers. If you want to go the enamel paint route, a paintbrush, enamel paint, scissors, tape, some sort of alcohol wipe or a Clorox wipe, and then this Stabilo pencil. It's a watercolor pencil basically, and so it can write on glass really well on hard surfaces, and it comes right off after. So it's great for kind of tracing or stenciling out your work. Now, why would you want to personalize a glass? I do a lot of etching and engraving, which means that I am engraving into the glass and making it permanent. But those tools are expensive and it takes a while to learn. But if you wanted to personalize a glass and make it really memorable for your guests at a dinner party or just to treat yourself to a nice glass of rosé, markers are a pretty efficient way and a pretty permanent way to get your mark on your glass. And if you hand wash it, it will stay for a long time. Now, it's semi-permanent because no marker is guaranteed to last forever. It depends on the wear and tear, how much you use it, if alcohol comes in contact with the design, or if soap touches it, whatever it is, it's not permanent forever, but if you take good care of it, it will be permanent for quite a while. So to begin, if you have your printout handy, I'm going to kind of walk you through this and how I would personalize wine glasses. You have all my information on the front here if you have any questions while you're going through this. So hand lettering is what you're going to be using to create an interesting script on your glass. And the idea to this, and there are many practices, I also have a blog post how to do hand lettering, is to thicken the downstrokes and make your thin upstrokes. So if you wanted to give it that calligraphy look, that's how you would do it. Now you don't have to do that. It can be monoline, and I'm going to show you later how you can do that with just your regular handwriting one time through. You don't have to emphasize anything. Now, if you did want to emphasize something, I'm going to use a Sharpie here to show you how you can do that with any word. Let's do rosé because the time calls for it. So if I were to write rosé in my regular font, it could be any type of cursive or script or even block lettering. So when you're doing hand lettering and you want to thicken some strokes and make some strokes thin, you are going to do just that. You're going to leave these thin strokes alone and you're going to thicken the downstrokes only. Now, when you do this, keep in mind, you always want to go from middle top to middle bottom. And you want to make sure you don't thicken anywhere past that because you're only doing the downstrokes. And if you go through it again, here's an up, down, down, up, down, up. Could give this a little pizzazz. Up, down, up, and back down. Now this is really large, so I might not be able to fit this on my rosé glass, but I wanted you to get the idea of thick and thin strokes. You can mimic that smaller with whatever pen or paint you're using. If you wanted to do block lettering, they don't really follow the thick and thin necessarily. What you're going to notice is that you're going to want to thicken some of these strokes and leave other ones alone. And it doesn't necessarily have to be thick and thin. But you do want to see some thin and some thick. So that, we can give a little bit of thickness here. S's are going to be notoriously tricky, but there's a couple different ways you can write them in here. Now I also have monograms in my workbook, and I have variations of some phrases you might want to use as well. But that's the gist to hand lettering. You might want to practice first with that, but we can do it monoline as well. And just to walk you through what this workbook has for you, I have small monogram script letters. I have big monogram script letters. We have more monogram script. And the reason these are big and small is because your last name goes in the middle and it has a bigger letter, and your first and middle go on the outsides, and those are smaller. So I've actually sized them appropriately so you could put it right behind your glass. I'm going to show you how to trace that out too. Then we have a different type of monogram block. You can go small here or big here. Just get creative. If you wanted to and had a smaller pen, you can get creative with the thickness. And back to big monogram block. Now, how to transfer this to your cup. Let's say I made a monogram and I use these blocks. You can use tracing paper. Not necessary, but if you wanted to, you can trace over this, practice your lettering to fit it in that box, pick up the tracing paper and put it behind your cup. You don't have to do that. You can actually just cut and paste those existing letters and put them right behind your cup and line them up nicely. But this is how to do it step by step. I'm going to be basically telling you how to do this. Now, to do your final monogram, we're going to get here in a second, but before we do, we have to decide what we want to do. And this last page actually has some fun sayings that I've written out for you. And I'm going to do 2 of them so you can see what they might look like with that hand lettering, thick and thin, and what it might look like with just a monoline. That means going one time through, don't worry about the thickness, and get it as close to good as you can. No one can see those little imperfections. Keep that in mind. So first thing I'm going to do is actually going to take this. You're going to print out the page, cut out the saying of your choice, and tape it behind your glass. So I'll do, let's do La Vie en Rose. Why not? So I'm just going to cut out the phrase that I want, and then I'm also going to cut out this phrase because I like them both. And this one is the hand lettered, thick downstrokes, and the other one is monoline. So I'm going to keep that to the side. And now what I'm going to do is take my glass and I'm going to place this behind it, approximately where I want it to be. You want to keep it at least an inch away from the rim. You don't want to be eating whatever paint or marker you're using while you're drinking. So I would say get it pretty close to the bottom there. And I'm just going to tape it in so that I know it won't move throughout the process here. Okay, pretty good. And basically once this is done, once I get this all taped up, I'm going to sketch it out with a Stabilo pen. That's why I said this isn't necessary. You could just trace it right onto this with using the guidelines you've taped in here. But sometimes I like to take this out so I can see it well and do this just the Stabilo pen, but you don't have to. All right, so La Vie en Rose. I think that should be okay. About an inch down, that's good. So now what I'm going to do is take I'm going to take a Sharpie pen. And what you can do, I've given you a slew of different markers you can use. Every medium you put on this glass will react differently. It's going to last a certain amount of time based on how you use it and how you take care of it. An oil-based Sharpie is really great because if you let it cure for 24 hours, it is pretty permanent until those factors might arise. And any oil-based pen is going to work well for that. I gave you some other choices. A Molotow also is great. Deco Color specifically is made for glass. And if you bake it, you can cure it by baking it. And same with the enamel paint. You can cure it by baking that as well. And the upsides and downsides to each are just what goes on the smoothest, what you like to use the most if you're more comfortable with paint. The markers are typically easier to apply onto the glass. And then if you get some chipping later, you can always fill it in with your Sharpie. So I have the Sharpie and I have the Molotow, but I'll use the Sharpie today since these are widely found at Michael's, on Amazon, Plaza Art Supply, wherever you want. Now, first thing you do before you do that, you actually hold it up straight like this, depress the tip to get the paint going inside, shake it, and then push it to the paper about 50 times. And I'm not going to go with this Stabilo pen because I'm going to write right on here. All right, now my ink's starting to come up. And these have been stored for a while, so I might need to give it a few shakes to make sure it's not oily. Because they're oil-based, you're going to get oily, but looks like we're pretty good for now. You really want to get that ink and pigment to the top. Okay. Now, like I said, you can go right on top of here. You don't need to use the pen. I'm actually going to take this off and use the pen so that you can see better when this is being applied. But the general rule is when you write it out, you want to go from left to right or right to left if you're a lefty, and you want to thicken your strokes as you go. Normally, and on that paper, I think I wrote write the whole word and then thicken it. For this, you want to apply that thickened stroke while the paint is still wet. So what I'll do here, I'm going to trace out my La Vie en Rose, generally where I want it, with the Stabilo. And this is so that I can take this paper off and you can see it being applied easier. So like I was saying, whatever you're going to write on here, left to right, thicken your downstrokes as you go. So I'm going to move all this out of the way so you can see the background while I paint it. Okay, so with my Sharpie, and remember, if you mess up, have some alcohol wipes or nail polish remover or even vodka on hand, something to take it off pretty quickly. This will dry really well and it'll be hard to get off, but you can always saturate it in some alcohol or a Mr. Clean sponge and it'll come off. All right, so now I'm going to apply it. You might even want a pillow under here. Sometimes I have a pillow, but you wouldn't be able to see it that well. So now remember what I said about thickening. If you want to thicken, now's the time. Downstroke. Downstroke, downstroke. And depending on how big you write, you might not get much thickness, but just a little bit will do it. Remember not to over thicken, just a little bit of thickness will give it that pop it needs. Now, curing the Sharpie has not proven to always make it permanent, but if you wanted to let this dry, I've given you curing instructions on the blog post. But Sharpie themselves does not say this is permanent when you cure. A lot of marker brands will have that information for you if they are able to do that. Now, once you write it, you're kind of done. You don't want to go over it too much, especially when it's still wet, because then it's going to just remove the existing marks you have. If you let it dry completely and you want to put another coat down, you can just let it dry completely. Because if you try to go over this again, you might start removing some of that paint and it's going to be hard to keep it opaque and white. Okay? So there's the hand lettering version. We can also do the enamel paint version, and this will be monoline. So I'm going to try to do this for you. I'm mixing some white and red together to make it pinkish. And for this enamel paint, if you decide to go this route, you just want a very small little brush that you can get these little marks in. Might want a paper towel on hand. All right, I'm going to get this painted up for you. And this is going to be harder to do monoline just because the brush, and you want light layers. I was going to say it's harder to do because the brush is meant to go thick and thin. It's harder to get it one single monoline, but it's doable. Just got to go really careful. And like I said, it's a little harder to apply. Go do a light first coat, let it dry a whole day actually, and do the second coat. And then cure it at 24 hours after that if you'd like. And this will stay, this is pretty resilient. That's the only downfall to the enamel, is it's hard to go on, but it is very resilient. And remember, this is not going to be perfect. I have a small brush recommendation that I really like. You make a little thickness like that R is there, don't worry about it, let it go. No one's gonna see that. And you can always maybe brush it up on your second coat. And then any other questions you have, feel free to email me or send me a DM on Instagram. I would be happy to help you out. And so then, once this is gone, you have your rosé cup.